Do you believe a song can calm a lonely soul? Sometimes, all it takes is a melody, soft, unexpected, and pure, to unlock the part of the heart that forgot how to feel. In a world that often moves too fast, the most beautiful moments come quietly, like a gentle voice in a cold train station, reaching someone who needed it more than they knew. If you've ever been comforted by a song in the most unexpected place, if a voice has ever stopped you in your tracks, reminded you of someone you lost, or gave you a reason to smile again, then this story is for you. Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Justice Reloaded HD, where the smallest gestures create the biggest miracles. Because today, we're sharing a true story of music, healing, and the kindness that blooms between strangers at a quiet Vermont train station. You won't want to miss what happens next. The old train station in Montpelier, Vermont, was the kind of place where time seemed to pause. Built with faded red brick and tall arched windows, it stood quietly beneath a sky heavy with flurries. The snow that fell was soft, more like a whisper than a storm, and the few passengers moving through the station left footprints that disappeared almost as soon as they were made. It was late afternoon in early winter, when the air carried a chill that crept under coats and the silence between train arrivals felt particularly deep. On one of the long wooden benches, 10-year-old Leo Whitlock sat hunched over, his knees pulled close to his chest. His small hands clamped over his ears, trying to block out every sound: the shuffle of boots, the hum of the intercom, the distant moan of the arriving train. His lips moved silently, repeating the same phrases over and over again, a self-soothing mantra only he understood. His father, Graham Whitlock, stood several feet away near the station pillar, keeping a watchful eye but giving his son space. Graham was a man of stature, tall, gray-haired, sharply dressed, but his eyes revealed something softer, something deeply tired. The billionaire tech mogul who had once built satellites now struggled to reach his own child. Ever since Leo lost partial hearing in his left ear, and with it the ease of speech, he had withdrawn into himself. Graham had taken him to every specialist money could buy, but nothing could unstick the boy's fear of loud noises, especially the sharp screech of a train whistle. Still, once a week, they came to the station. It was part of a slow, painful process. Exposure. Adaptation. Hope. That's when she appeared. Maya Brooks had just ended her shift at the diner 2 blocks away. Her apron still hung from her belt loop, and her guitar case was slung over her back, worn at the edges. She moved like someone used to being overlooked, quiet and unfussy. But when she reached one of the less crowded corners of the waiting area, she sat down, unlatched her guitar, and began to strum, barely more than a murmur of chords. Then, without looking up, she began to hum. No lyrics. No performance. Just a gentle lullaby, the kind that didn't try to impress anyone. It floated through the space like steam from a teacup, warm, invisible, strangely grounding. And Leo stilled. His fingers loosened. His shoulders uncurled. Slowly, he lowered his hands from his ears and turned. He didn't speak. He just looked, first at the woman singing, then back at his father, as if trying to make sense of something impossible. "Dad," he whispered, voice slightly slurred but clear enough, "she sings like Mom." Graham stiffened. He hadn't heard Leo mention his late wife in over a year, not since the accident, not since the boy stopped speaking full sentences. And now, out of the blue, he was connecting a stranger's song to her voice. It pierced through Graham's practiced attachment and hit something raw, something he didn't even realize was still open. He looked at Maya, young, maybe late 20s, worn denim jacket, brown curls tucked under a knit beanie, and for the first time that day he really saw her. She wasn't performing. She wasn't even aware she was being heard. She was just singing. For no one. For everyone. For the silence. And somehow, it was exactly what Leo needed. That evening, Maya Brooks walked home with the echo of the day still humming softly in her ears. She hadn't meant to sing for anyone. She didn't even know what compelled her to sit down and hum that lullaby. It was just a reflex, a way to ease the ache in her own chest as the cold settled in. But the moment she saw that boy, small, shaking, folded into himself like a paper crane, something inside her had stirred. She had just kicked off her shoes and turned on the kettle when her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Thank you for singing today." It was the first time in months my son stayed at the station for more than 5 minutes. Maya's hand paused over the stove. Her thumb hovered over the screen. "If you pass by tomorrow, I'd like to offer you a cup of tea, or another song if that's not too much to ask." There was no name. Just the message. Polite. Hesitant. Grateful. She stared at it for a long time, rereading the lines until the kettle whistled. Then she set the phone down without responding. Something about it felt intimate, too intimate. She hadn't sung to be noticed, certainly not to be invited. But the boy's face had stayed with her. The way his eyes lit up, the way he looked at her as if she reminded him of someone he'd almost forgotten. That alone was enough. The next day, just before sunset, Maya returned to the station. No reply. No promise. Just instinct. She didn't wear her apron this time. She didn't bring sheet music. Only her old guitar and a folded page with the lyrics to a children's song she used to sing for her mother, back before the illness had taken her memories one by one. Leo was already there. He sat closer to the middle bench this time, not as curled into himself, not as guarded. His backpack sat at his feet. His father stood at a respectful distance again, coat collar turned up, eyes tracking every movement with quiet intensity. When Maya entered, she offered no words, just a small nod in Leo's direction. He gave a shy half-smile, the kind children reserve for people they're not quite sure they're allowed to trust, but want to. She sat 2 benches down, not crowding, and tuned her guitar in soft, measured strums. Then, with the same gentle voice as the day before, she began to sing. This time it was "You Are My Sunshine," simple, familiar, and a little wobbly from the cold. Leo's eyes widened, then crinkled as he grinned. He scooted a few inches closer, just enough to hear better. His hands tapped his knees in rhythm, and every now and then, he mouthed the words silently, like he was testing their shape before daring to give them sound. From his corner, Graham didn't move. But the faintest smile broke across his face, fleeting, uncertain but real. Maya kept playing, watching the boy relax. She didn't know what she was doing, not really. She wasn't a therapist or a miracle worker. Just a waitress with a guitar and a good memory for lullabies. But in that moment, it felt like enough. Just a song. Just one more. And somehow it mattered. The weeks that followed brought a quiet rhythm to the old train station, an unspoken appointment between 3 people who never quite said what they were meeting for. Every Sunday, just as the sun began to dip behind the steeples and snowy rooftops of Montpellier, Maya would arrive with her guitar case in one hand and a thermos of chamomile tea in the other. She never came in a rush. She never asked permission. She simply showed up. And so did Leo. He no longer hid in the corners. He still flinched when the train whistle screamed through the station, but the panic didn't paralyze him the way it used to. Instead, he would reach for the familiar, his earmuffs, his father's hand, or Maya's music. And slowly, the boy who once buried himself in silence began to explore the edge of sound. At first, it was subtle. While Maya played light-hearted children's tunes, classics like Twinkle, Twinkle or The Wheels on the Bus, Leo would tap the bench in time, his fingers mimicking the rhythm with quiet precision. Then came the humming. He didn't even realize he was doing it. His lips moved almost unconsciously, as though the melodies were coaxing words out of hiding. Maya noticed. She didn't say anything, didn't call attention to it. Instead, she adjusted her songs, choosing ones with simple refrains and gentle cadences. She switched from lullabies to mellow jazz standards, Dream a Little Dream of Me, Blue Skies, Even Autumn Leaves, and Leo responded. His mouth formed more words. He whispered along, syllable by syllable. Each note, each verse, was like a stepping stone across a river he used to fear. Then came the moment. It was a cold Sunday afternoon, Snow gathering again on the station windows, the platform nearly deserted except for a few bundled-up commuters. Maya had just finished tuning when Leo sat down beside her, not across, not at a distance, but right next to her on the bench. He was holding a folded piece of paper. "I learned this," he said, his voice soft but steady, holding out the lyrics to a song Maya had sung the week before. She took it from his hands gently, looked down, and smiled. "Would you like to sing it together?" Leo nodded. She began to strum, slow and steady. It was a simple melody, just a verse and a chorus. Maya started the first line, then paused. Without prompting, Leo filled in the next line. He didn't stutter. He didn't stop. His voice cracked in one or two places, but it was clear, fragile yes, but so deliberate it made the moment feel sacred. Maya glanced up, and from behind one of the station's wide marble columns, Graham stood frozen. He had always kept his distance, part strategy, part self-preservation. He didn't want to interfere, to put pressure on the delicate thing that was growing between his son and this stranger with a guitar. But this was different. His boy was singing. Out loud. To someone who wasn't family. To someone who wasn't his therapist or his teacher. And Graham's eyes, so often calculating and cool, welled with something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. Gratitude. Wonder. Hope. He didn't move. He didn't interrupt. He simply let the tears come, quiet and slow, like the music that had somehow given his son permission to find his voice again. And on that bench, in that quiet corner of a nearly empty station, a child who once trembled at sound sang his first full line of music, and smiled when he finished it. The evening had gone the way most of them had in recent weeks: gentle music, soft laughter, and the flicker of something fragile forming between Maya and Leo. She had just finished strumming the last note of a lullaby when she noticed Graham approaching. It was unusual. He usually stayed in the background, quietly observing from a distance, his presence subtle but constant. But tonight, his footsteps were firm. His coat was still buttoned up to the collar, but his jaw was clenched tighter than usual, and his hands, normally tucked calmly in his pockets, hung stiff at his sides. Maya stood beside her guitar case, slinging it over her shoulder, ready to leave as she always did. But Graham blocked her path. "Maya," he said, voice low, firm. She looked up, surprised. "Mr. Whitlock. I wanted to speak with you. Alone." There was something in his tone that made the warmth of the evening vanish. The station, still echoing with the faint remnants of her last tune, now felt colder, starker. "I appreciate what you've been doing for Leo," Graham began. "Truly. I can see that he enjoys your company, and I don't deny that he's made progress." Maya nodded, cautiously. "I'm not trying to do anything grand. I just sing. He seems to like it." "That's just it," Graham interrupted, his voice growing sharper. "He likes it because it's safe. Because it's emotional. But what he needs isn't comfort. He needs treatment. Real treatment. From professionals. Speech therapists. Behavioral specialists. People with credentials." Maya's lips parted slightly, the words forming but not coming out yet. "I know you mean well," he continued. "But I don't want Leo to get attached to an illusion. Music can't fix what's broken." There it was. The sentence hung in the air, heavy and cold. Maya blinked slowly, the sting behind her eyes rising faster than she expected. She looked down at the scuffed toe of her boot, then back up at him, not with anger, but with something more painful, understanding. "I know I'm not a professional," she said softly. "I didn't come here to be one." Graham said nothing, his face unreadable. "I just sing because I know what it feels like to be afraid of sound," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "To have every noise feel like it might break you apart. And I know what it means when someone, anyone, sings just loud enough to drown out the fear." He shifted uncomfortably, but didn't reply. "I wasn't trying to heal him," she said. I was trying to be a moment of peace in a world that's too loud. Graham looked away, toward the tracks where the next train wouldn't arrive for another 20 minutes. The silence between them stretched out. I should go, Maya finally said. She adjusted the strap of her guitar and walked past him, gently but firmly, her steps slow and steady. He didn't call after her. And she didn't return. That night, Graham sat alone in his study, the city lights outside his window blurred by a frost that hadn't yet thawed. He poured himself a glass of scotch he didn't really want and stared at the untouched stack of therapy brochures on his desk. Somewhere inside him, a part believed he had done the responsible thing, the rational thing, the fatherly thing. But another part, quieter, more persistent, wondered why Leo hadn't smiled once on the ride home. The train station felt different now. It wasn't just the colder air, or the gray clouds hanging lower over Montpelier. It was the absence of something invisible but deeply missed. The music was gone. The warmth. The soft voice that used to turn the clatter of heels and the blare of train horns into background noise. Maya hadn't returned. And neither had Leo. At least, not in the same way. He still came with Graham every Sunday, just like before. But instead of inching closer to the benches where he once sat beside her, Leo now clung to his father's coat with both hands, his fingers twisting the fabric until his knuckles turned white. He wouldn't go near the center of the station. He avoided the benches. He kept his earmuffs on, even when there was no train in sight. The boy who had once tapped rhythms on the wood and whispered verses through hesitant lips now pressed his palms tightly against his ears again. His shoulders curled in. His eyes stayed low. The songs inside him had gone silent. Graham noticed. He watched as Leo refused to enter the waiting area, standing frozen at the threshold like it might swallow him whole. The boy who had once smiled at a simple guitar chord now flinched at footsteps. The joy he'd discovered, even if only briefly, had slipped away like a vapor. And Graham knew why. He had sent it away. That evening, after another failed attempt to coax Leo into the station, Graham sat beside him on the edge of the cold wooden bench just outside the platform doors. The winter sun was setting fast, casting long orange shadows across the snow-dusted pavement. Leo wouldn't look at him. He just stared down at his boots, one untied lace dragging along the ground. Graham studied his son's small profile, the roundness of his cheeks, the tight line of his mouth, the way his eyes blinked slowly, like each moment took effort. Without thinking, Graham reached for Leo's hand. It was cold. Small. But it didn't pull away. And then, in a voice rough from disuse and years of boardroom meetings, Graham began to hum. It was off-key. Too low. Hesitant. But he sang the lullaby, an old one. One his wife used to sing. One he hadn't heard aloud since the hospital. Since the day everything changed. The tune stumbled at first, words catching in his throat. But he pushed through, letting the notes fall where they may. No accompaniment. No guitar. Just his voice, cracked, aged, imperfect. He didn't know if Leo would respond. He didn't expect him to. But after a moment, the boy turned his head. A smile flickered at the corner of his mouth. "That sounds like Mom," Leo whispered. Graham stopped, heart stalling. "But lower," Leo added, tilting his head. "Like 3 keys too low." Graham chuckled, really chuckled, for the first time in weeks. It bubbled up awkwardly, caught between disbelief and relief. Leo looked up at him then. Really looked. His eyes met his father's with something old and new all at once. Recognition. Connection. And Graham understood, finally, fully. Music hadn't been curing his son. It hadn't been some magic therapy. It had been a bridge. A thread back to a voice he missed, to a woman they both loved, to the warmth that had once lived in their home. It was memory. Safety. Presence. And sometimes, that was enough. Sometimes, music wasn't about healing what was broken. Sometimes, it was about holding on to what still remained. It took Graham longer than it should have to admit he was wrong. Not about the science. Not about the therapy. About something deeper, something he couldn't quantify or strategize his way around. For weeks, he had watched Leo slip back into silence. He tried to fill the void with appointments, charts, routines. But the more he scheduled, the more distant Leo became. And every time Graham hummed that old lullaby, hoping for another spark, all he found was a boy politely smiling, then turning away. So he did what most proud men do when they've run out of reasons. He searched for the woman who never gave him one. It took him 3 evenings and 2 conversations at the diner to find her. Maya wasn't hard to track down. Montpelier wasn't a big town. But approaching her again, after the way he dismissed her, that was something else entirely. He found her sitting outside a coffee shop on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, guitar case by her feet, fingers wrapped around a mug that had gone lukewarm. She wore the same denim jacket, her curls pulled back beneath a faded green beanie. There was no music this time. Just silence, and the low hum of passing cars. Graham hesitated before speaking. "Maya." She looked up. Her expression was unreadable, guarded. She didn't smile. Didn't scowl. Just waited. "I owe you an apology," he said. That got a response. Not a word, just a raised eyebrow, barely perceptible. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he continued. "Protecting Leo. Giving him structure. Real help. But he hasn't sung since you stopped coming." Maya exhaled softly, her eyes dropping to the rim of her cup. "He doesn't tap his fingers. He doesn't hum in the car. He barely looks up at the station anymore," Graham said, his voice quieter now. "And it took me until this morning to realize, maybe he didn't need fixing. Maybe he just needed something real." He paused. "I used to think money could solve anything. That if I just found the right expert, bought the best care, I could bring my son back." Maya looked at him then, still saying nothing, but her face was gentler now. "But you," he said, "you sat down with a guitar and a song I didn't even recognize, and somehow you reached him. You brought him out." She tilted her head, eyes thoughtful, and finally replied, "I didn't bring him out, Mr. Whitlock. He came out on his own. The music was just a door." Graham nodded slowly. "He misses you." Maya gave a small wistful smile, then looked away toward the sidewalk. A child passed by with a paper bag and a lollipop, his boots too big for his feet. "I wasn't trying to be anything for him," she said. "I just saw a boy who looked how I used to feel. Trapped. Scared. Drowning in sound." She turned back to Graham. "You're not wrong about therapy. It helps. It matters. But before a child learns how to speak, they have to want to." Graham's shoulders sank just slightly, as if a weight was finally shifting. "And sometimes," Maya added, "a song is just enough to make them want to." He took that in. "Let it settle. I know it's not your job," he said quietly. "But if you ever feel like singing again, I think Leo would want to hear it." This time, Maya smiled for real. "Maybe," she said, reaching down for her guitar case, "we both would." Spring arrived gently in Montpelier, brushing the rooftops with sunlight and softening the frost that had clung to the edges of every windowpane. At the train station, the change was even more noticeable, not just in the weather, but in the atmosphere. Where silence once hung heavy, now there was music. Light, imperfect, beautiful music. It started small. One bench. One mic. One song. Graham had made the calls. Maya had found the voices. And Leo had given the reason. Together, they created something called Station Sessions, a weekly gathering where local musicians could play for children with special needs. It wasn't formal, or polished, or sponsored by any big foundation. But it was real. Real songs, real faces, real joy. And that was enough. Every Sunday, the old station transformed. Travelers would pause as they passed through. Some sat down, some just stood still. A few cried without knowing why. Parents brought children who had long been afraid of public places. Kids who flinched at crowds, who rarely smiled, who never spoke unless spoken to. And yet somehow here they listened. They laughed. They reached out. Leo always sat in the front row. At first, he tapped along on Maya's guitar case, the way he used to. Then he began humming again, the way he hadn't in months. Eventually, he started helping Maya set up, testing cables, adjusting the little portable lamp she carried like a pro. And then one Sunday afternoon, with the sky just beginning to turn amber, he stood. He didn't announce it. He just stepped forward, held the lyric sheet in both hands, and looked at Maya. She understood immediately. She strummed the first chord. And Leo sang. It was a children's song, silly, light, familiar. His voice cracked once. He forgot a word halfway through and giggled. But he kept going. He didn't stammer. He didn't freeze. He finished the line, turned to the small audience, and smiled. From the side, Graham clapped. Slowly. Quietly. But he didn't stop. Maya played the final chord, and for a few seconds, the station stood still, caught in the kind of silence that follows something truly good. Leo turned to his dad and whispered something, just loud enough for him to hear. "I used to be scared of the train whistle," he said. "But now, if someone's singing louder than it, I don't mind being here." Graham looked at his son, not with pity, not with worry, but with pride. That night, as the last notes of the day faded into the platform, Graham, Maya, and Leo sat together on the bench where it had all begun. The cold was gone. The fear was gone. All that remained was the hum of trains in the distance, and the gentle echo of a boy who had finally found his voice. If you believe that music can be the light that slips through the cracks of a weary soul, then please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Justice Reloaded HD. Because here, we'll keep sharing the quiet, powerful stories that remind us. Sometimes, a single song is all it takes to change a life.